For those of you who were at the Chelsea Flower Show this year, it was certainly the year of the Cornus, and very much so on the Bernkoos Nurseries stand, which some of you may have seen on television. And one of the stars of the show was Cornus Venus, or put it correctly, Cornus times Rutigerensis Venus. And this was a cross made in the USA between Cornus kousa from China and Cornus nuttallii from the USA. And these two different species in different continents flower 50 or so days apart. So it was a great labour of love by the hybridizers to produce something as spectacular and beautiful as this. And Cornus Venus has the largest bracts of any Cornus so far created. And they're bracts, not flowers. The flower is right in the centre of the bracts, and the bracts are there to attract the bees and insects into the centre of the flower and to achieve pollination. And this Cornus Venus has been out probably for three weeks or so, and you're just starting to see the red or purple spotting in the bracts as they start to fade and drop. But when you look further up the branches, you can see that there's still some way to go before all these bracts fade and we lose this spectacular, very upright growing plant for another year. This plant has been in the ground for about 10 years. Cornus Venus is extremely drought tolerant. It's also mildew tolerant. It'll grow on neutral to acidic soils, and certainly it was the star of the show at Chelsea, and we sold scores and scores of these wonderful little plants. People ask how quickly they grow, and this is a fair size for 10 years. But let's now go and look at some of the other cornuses which featured on the Bernkoos stand and have a look at them in the flesh in the garden. This was also prominent on the Bernkoos nursery stand at Chelsea, and this is Cornus kousa var chinensis. Cornus kousa var chinensis obviously comes from China, and Cornus kousa, which is slightly different, comes from Japan and Korea. And Cornus kousa var chinensis is still not fully out. The bracts are still rather smaller. You can see that this is a weeping, spreading small tree or large bush. And the Japanese form has tufts of hair underneath some of the leaves and down the petiole, whereas Cornus kousa var chinensis does not have that. And before we finish this video, we're going to look at a mature plant of Cornus kousa var chinensis, but this is what you saw on the Chelsea stand. It was first introduced in 1907 into the UK, and it got a first-class certificate in 1924. An easy-to-grow plant, full sun or partial shade is fine. Again, not particularly fussy about soils, providing you aren't on chalk. And something to grow that'll flower in the start of the summer when the main woodland garden is starting to go over. And here we've got Cornus kousa wolf eyes. And it has these leaves with very pronounced white variegation down the edges of the leaves. But when you look at the bracts, they're quite small and they merge into the foliage rather well. But you can clearly see that this is a form of Cornus kousa, which is grown probably more for its foliage than for its flowers. It grows to about 12-15 feet and spreads a little bit more. The deer have been nibbling the sides of it, which hasn't helped, but where it's got away at the top, it's doing well. And in the autumn, as we've seen in a previous video, these lovely leaves go red and purple in the centres, and you get a beautiful autumn effect. just one of the range of different forms of Cornus kousa, and we're going to quickly have a look at 3 or 4 more. Now this is a Japanese selection, Cornus kousa Miss Satomi, or otherwise known as just simply Cornus kousa Satomi. And this is possibly the most spectacular of the Cornus kousa varieties, until you see the one we're going to look at right at the end, which is very pink. The bracts are very pink. It needs to be grown in full sun, and it has a very spreading habit. And if you don't grow it in full sun, the bracts become rather pale, as you see here on a branch that's a bit shaded. Bracts are paler. If you look in the reference books, it says that sometimes the flowers are quite pale after a dry summer. Well, we had a dry summer, but we had a very wet winter, and the bracts are anything but pale. I would say this particular tree is flowering even better than it did last year, when we saw its rather attractive reddish autumn colour. But really quite a show for early June, and something that everyone should want to grow in their garden. This is Cornus kousa Weberiana, which has very dense foliage, and again this lovely spreading habit. And this selection of Cornus kousa was based upon the fact that it is one of the best Cornus for fruiting, and it produces enormous strawberry-like fruits. But sadly this year we don't see many flowers at all on it until you get way up into the sunlight at the top, on the top branches, and you see just emerging there quite a number of bracts, which probably will have giant strawberries on them come October and into November. Cornus kousa Weberiana. Looking up above me, you see Cornus kousa chinensis Wisley Green, and certainly this one is flowering away rather better than the last one we looked at. And when you look lower down at the bracts, you can see why this particular clone has been named. Before very long, instead of being white, these bracts are going to go mottled pink, red and purple, and they're just starting to do so, whereas those in the full shade are still sort of creamy green. But once the heat gets to these bracts, they put on a tremendous colour, not as good as Satomi, but one where the bracts are blotched and mixed in colour, and that is the attraction of this gorgeous plant, which was named at Wisley. And just very briefly, this is Cornus kousa Gold Star. It was bred at the Sakata nursery in Japan in 1978. It's fairly sparse flowering, and the bracts have already faded off. But just look at the colours in these leaves, the yellow and the green, what a gorgeous mix. And as the autumn comes, you get, as we saw in a previous video, this gorgeous red and scarlet tinting to the edges of the leaves. So we saw Wolf Eyes, which was a white variegated form, and here you got Gold Star, which is a yellow variegated form. And there are many different forms of Cornus, but as a variegated one rather than as a flowering plant, this would certainly be my favourite. So now we're looking at Cornus kousa chinensis as a mature tree here at Caerhays, and this is probably 80 to 100 years old, and you can see almost every little leaf node has a bract high up in the top of the tree. The bracts are still greenish, but they will become white, as we'll see in a second. And this is a deciduous tree, as they all are, but at the moment it looks quite evergreen, really quite dense, and extraordinarily hardy. But let's just look at a few of the bracts where they've come out more fully. And here a bit lower down in the second plant, which is a little bit further on than the first one, you can see the bracts looking at their absolute best. And these actually seed themselves onto the edge of the drive from the giant strawberries you get in the autumn. And that's where quite a lot of our plants we've sold at Caerhays over the years have come from, little seedlings in the side of the drive here. Some of you who went to Chelsea may say, where is Cornus kousa Scarlet Fire, which was the star of the show at Chelsea and a brand new introduction, never seen before at Chelsea, bred in the USA and imported by us from Switzerland last autumn, and displayed 3 great big plants displayed on the stand. They were pink when we first put them on the stand, and they rapidly, in the heat, turned into scarlet. But I'm afraid you will have to look at some pictures which Carl will add to this video to see what Cornus kousa Scarlet Fire really is and how absolutely must-have plant as it is.